Hey, it's me, Jakey Pigs. What is word? I answered the call. I made a submission for the Punishers 3D Community Challenge, the Eternal Ascent.
Eternal Ascent 3D Community Challenge. That's right, this month I am challenging you to put your unique twist on this provided bare bones template.
The rules themselves were simple enough. All you had to do was replace the character, maintain the visual weight of the stairs, don't touch the camera. So immediately, one of the ideas I had was one that could of course land me in the pit of despair.
There's always a handful of artists that end up in the
pit of despair.
That idea was to take Lanky Kong from Donkey Kong 64 and have him walking on his hands up the stairs. The rules don't really say you can't do this, but they just say that you can change the character's position a little bit and make his feet step where you need them to step, essentially. So I didn't know if this would land me in the pit of despair or if I was breaking the rules. I don't know yet because the alt renders montage isn't out, so I haven't been able to look for my render. I'll do an update if I'm in the pit of despair. So I got a pure ref together with a lot of Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze images. Not much Donkey Kong 64, I just really leaned into the Tropical Freeze look. I didn't have time to make Lanky myself, so I did a good old Google search, found a 3D model of Lanky Kong, and I downloaded him. The creator of that 3D model is Corey Richards, and it was fantastic. It worked perfectly. It came pre-rigged and attached to this weird icosphere. I couldn't find the rig and I didn't know what the icosphere was for, so I just deleted all that. Rigged him up myself, got him in an A pose, whip bam slop, good enough. The next thing was to try to retarget him to the character that came with the Eternal Ascent starter files. Rococo has this thing where if you put your character in a T-pose, you can copy another character's animation, and it should essentially copy him to that animation, so you don't have to animate him at all yourself. So that led me to create this masterpiece of a T-pose. Believe it or not, it didn't work. That meant I was gonna have to animate Lanky Kong doing a handstand by hand, which I was very intimidated by, because before this I hadn't messed around with animating that much. So of course you know what I did. I put my game face on, I buckled down, and I walked away from that to make some paths. So I just made the paths using geometry nodes, and then I tried to model a spiral by hand. Quickly found out I was wasting my time and thought there has to be a better way to do this. Who would have thought? You just use the corkscrew and it's the same exact shape as the stairs that the Punisher made for the starter files. I'm stupid. Oh my gosh. I have the poo-poo brain. What a freaking idiot I am. So while trying not to feel like a dum-dum, I modeled the grass path and then I made some wood planks. And that was it for the paths. So then I started modeling some cliffs that you would see in the distance. I did them my good old fashioned blow up the vertices way and then decimate those vertices so they wouldn't be as high vertices. Yeah, I did that good old method. They worked. I think they were a little too high detail. In the end, they probably slowed my render times down a lot, especially considering they weren't the main focus of the scene. So then after that, I decided, well, I gotta finish animating Lanky, because no Lanky, no render, no cool handstand. How will I ever know if I'm in the pit of despair? At first, I was trying to model him by hand and have him follow the starter file character step by step. I would move the body with it, move the hands to the feet. Messed around with that for a good hour until I realized, this character that Clint made for the starter files seems to be following this strange handle in the middle. Weird. They're following each other. So I parented Lanky to that handle, and who would have thought it worked? He was following the same exact path as that handle. So all I had to do now was animate Lanky's hands stepping, animate the in-betweens, mess around with some animation layers to change his level a little bit, and I was done. I did it. I animated Lanky doing a handstand. I was super proud of that. That was a big high for me, and then I wrote that into my next little project for this. I wasted about a day's work making a ship. And I thought that ship wasn't good enough, so I wasted another day's work making a ship. So at first I thought I was gonna make this cool pirate ship shooting some cannonballs and throw some explosions in the scene, which I didn't which I never did get around to, but I'll go into that later. So then I thought the scene needed more, so I wanted Funky Kong to be surfing on the water. I found Funky Kong online, downloaded him. It was made by Bowser Beatdown. Fantastic 3D model. All I had to do was make the surfboard. Struggled with vertex painting for a little bit, don't know why. I messed around with a few different animations for him. None of them looked good. I quickly realized I am not good at animating, and animating is so much harder than I thought it was going to be. So I ended up just making him surf across the main scene because I didn't have time to make him do anything else. I wanted the boat to be firing cannonballs at him and for him to be dodging, but I never got there. And that's another thing, is the cannonballs. I had an Embergen explosion I downloaded, but it was making my computer tank. I thought, this is probably too much for my computer and it's gonna take so much time to render this. And then I tried to make a stylized explosion, but found out that it was only for Eevee, so it wasn't looking good in cycles. I didn't have time, I had about a week left to finish the project, so unfortunately I walked away from that. I think it would have made a big difference in my scene, but it is what it is, I'm finished now. I made some bananas for the scenes. I think the bananas turned out fantastic. They look great. Then it was just adding some objects to the scene to flesh it out a little bit. I added some rocks, I added some more piers, added the broken pier in the middle, and then I messed around with some of the lighting, made some distance fog, I forget what you call that, fall off. Made some clouds, and then it was time to render my scene. My very first render, one frame was gonna take 20 minutes to render out. That's probably normal for some people, but this was, I think, Friday night for me, and the project was due Sunday. So by the time the render was done, it was gonna be a couple hours past the time that was due to turn in the project. So I went back into my scene just to see what details I could change or take out or remove. It turns out the palm trees in the focal point, they're about 8 leaves per tree, 6 or 8, one of the two, and all of them, for 4 or 5 trees, had a subdivision surface level of 3. That's just ridiculous. So I turned all the leaves down to subdivision surface 1, and my render times went from 20 minutes a frame to 5 minutes a frame. That's much better. Yeah. So I was able to do 3 different renders. The first one, the sails had this weird issue. They just looked terrible. So I had to go back in, try to fix that. The second render would have been good enough, but Funky Kong was kind of just floating above the water, so I said, I have time for one more, I'll fix him. So I didn't really fix him, and I rendered out a third one. That's about all I had time for. I was getting really fatigued at this point. This is the hardest I've ever worked on a project, and this was actually the first thing I finished. I was already really tired and kind of just burnt out, because this was hours every day of just kind of troubleshooting and trying to figure stuff out and modeling a bunch of stuff and failing a lot. So yeah, this was the project in the end. And then I got it submitted. Overall, I don't know why I'm holding my mic so high. Overall, I'm pretty proud of it. There's so much more I wish I did differently and so many things I wish I changed, but the project's over, and I think it was good to have a timeline to stick to because it forced me to finish something. And looking at the top 100 renders, one thing they all had in common was they told a story and they just had so many hidden details. Whereas mine, you'll look at it and that's all you get. Just Lanky Kong doing a handstand, walking up some planks, and some dude surfing by. Whereas one scene in particular, there are a bunch of orcs fighting in the woods, and just for no reason, behind the trees, there's a dragon flying by. And I didn't notice it till the 10th loop of the render. And just mine was missing stuff like that, just little details that bring the scene so much life. And mine's just kind of flat. It's just, it doesn't even look Donkey Kong really. The only thing Donkey Kong about it are the bananas, Funky Kong, and Lanky. If I took them out, you wouldn't know that was Donkey Kong. I think one thing I learned is that when you have when I have an idea, I need to lean into it more. I should have really leaned into the Donkey Kong to make it feel that way. Should have had more bananas around the scene. Should have almost leaned into a platformer type thing. Made floating platforms in the distance, I think. That would have been cool. And I think it would have made more sense to have Funky Kong running along that or something. But I just didn't lean into my idea enough. I think I was too stubborn about my ideas. I wanted a ship for some reason, and I wanted it firing, and I wanted it on the water. The water was definitely a big part of why my render times took so long, I think. I could have just leaned into a jungle scene. So many of the jungle scenes looked so good. But all in all, what I learned is that I'm actually getting pretty good at Blender. My first scene isn't amazing by any means, but I did a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of ticking boxes here and there. I'm starting to know where things are at. I'm starting to know how to problem solve. So I was proud of that. I walked away from it with that confidence that, hey, I'm actually starting to know my way around this program after about 2 years. About doggone time. So that was my Eternal Ascent render. Looks okay. I still suck at Blender, but I'm starting to suck a little less. Overall, I'm proud of how it turned out, and I'm proud that I was able to execute Lanky Kong. I hope I'm not in the pit of despair. Ah! Hey, it's me, Jake Pakes from the future. Update. I am not. Let me fix you. Hey, I am not in the pit of. I'm not in the pit of despair. I made it. Look, right here. Here I am at 3 hours, 22 minutes, and 22 seconds. Hey, no, what'd I do? Wait. Beautiful. I made it. That's it. I'm not in the pit of despair. Okay, bye. Go back to the video. Anyway, yeah, that was my Eternal Ascent. Bye now. What do you mean I sent them back to the end of the video? There was an ending right after I said that?